Hello and welcome to the School Home Connection. I'm Nathan, and today we're going to talk about how children should learn math. Traditionally, math has been taught as a memorization skill. You memorize your times tables, you memorize the Pythagorean theorem, but you never really understand how it works. And for true mastery, we need to understand the fundamentals of how something works. So why is this important? First, math is a universal language. When your child learns math, they are unlocking a new way to communicate with other people. Secondly, math is a big part of finances. And as I mentioned in my last video, finances are one of the 3 big limiters of how we can live our physical lives. When someone is mathematically fluent, that means that they don't have to put as much effort into the mathematical reasoning behind a financial decision, and instead can put more focus on the impact of that financial decision on their lives. So how should children learn math? We need context when learning a new skill, so we're going to try and provide as much context as possible and remove that context away slowly as your child gains mastery. We'll move from physical all the way to abstract. Starting with the physical, we have stage 1, concrete representation. That's where we have physical objects to represent mathematical skills. Having physical representation will allow your child to see and manipulate those things that you wish for them to learn. From very basic skills like counting, adding, subtracting, all the way to more complicated skills like multiplication, division, and geometry, we can use physical objects to represent these ideas. The use and manipulation of these items will allow your child to lay a strong foundation in their mathematical skills because they understand how these things work and how they interact with each other. After the physical representation, we're going to remove a bit of context and move to pictorial representation. This is where children are going to draw what they're representing instead of actually having physical objects. Now this is the next step because it allows the child to have to process and create the image in their head of what they've seen before and then represent that on paper. Your child will also be able to solve problems quicker because they're not having to gather the resources, manipulate and move them around to show it. They're visualizing in their head before putting it onto paper. After a child has shown mastery of pictorial representation, that's when they can move to the abstract representation. That's where we remove all of the context and it's just numbers. Abstract representation is where we use numbers to represent objects. It's what allows us to shorten a story like I have $5 and my mom pays me $6 and now I have $11 all the way down to 5 plus 6 equals 11. The goal of abstract is great. It allows us to quickly and accurately solve problems without having to get the objects out, without having to draw pictures of it. We can just do the math. But in order for that solid understanding to happen, that reasoning behind why mathematical skills work, we need to move through the progression from concrete representation to pictorial representation and finally abstract representation. Now that we understand how children should be learning math, from that concrete representation to pictorial representation and then finally to abstract representation, let's look at an example of what this would look like. Today we're going to look at addition, which is how I learned how truly important this progression is. Shout out to Mrs. Kroll, who was my assistant principal at my first teaching job. She was the one who taught me all of this. Starting with concrete representation. When beginning to learn how to add things together, it is important for the child to have physical representations of the objects they are adding. That way they can show them as 2 separate groups and then push them together to make one total group. This also allows children to count the objects by moving them as they count. At the beginning, children do not have the fluency or quickness to look at 2 groups and know the total number in both groups. Counting the groups together is the beginning of building that fluency. While you're using the physical representation, I would also recommend having the numbers there as well so that they start to make that connection between the objects and the abstract. Once a child is able to consistently add 2 groups of physical objects together, then they're ready to move on to pictorial representation. At this stage, the children, instead of having physical groups, they will draw 2 separate groups of objects, and then they'll draw a 3rd group which represents the total of those 2 groups. When a child can do this, it will improve how quickly they can add 2 numbers together. And finally, once your child has shown that they can consistently add 2 numbers together using pictorial representations, they are ready to move to abstract representation. At the beginning of abstract, your child will probably need to use some strategies like counting on. Counting on is where we have a problem like 5 plus 3, and your child starts at 5 and then they count on 3 more numbers, 6, 7, 8. Eventually, your child will memorize that 5 plus 3 equals 8, and that's a good thing. It's not a good thing if that's all they understand, and that's why we want to move through this progression of that concrete representation to lay a strong foundation, then pictorial representation to begin to do these problems quicker, and then finally to abstract representation where it becomes natural for them to solve these problems. And now I want to give you some goals that I have as a teacher that you can have as a parent to help make sure that you're staying on track as you support your child in developing math skills. Goal number 1 is to think physical. Before you start working with your child, you need to think about how are you going to make this learning physical? How are you going to use concrete representations to lay that foundation? Start with thinking about the skill itself. How would you represent this in a physical way? And if you're unsure, there's lots of great resources online. In the future, I'm going to be coming out with more videos on specific math skills that will give you some concrete representations of how to teach that math skill. If there's a skill that you would like me to cover in the future, make sure to leave it in the comments. Goal number 2 is to gamify, or make the learning fun. Create your own board game with questions about the skill your child is learning. Use incentives when practicing the skill, and always give positive praise for desired outcomes. A child learns best when they're invested in the learning. Children love to have fun and are motivated by positive feedback. And goal number 3 is to make it meaningful. Math needs to be relevant. And luckily, there are a lot of areas of our life that use math. We use math when we go shopping, we use math in sports, we use math when playing games, we use math all the time. So find real-life examples where you use that math skill and create stories of times that you could use that math skill. For example, talk about a time that you had $5 and then your mom paid you $7 for mowing the lawn, and you wanted to figure out how much money you had now. So you had to take that money and you put it together and you found out that you had $12. When children see math as a skill that they need to have, they become intrinsically motivated to learn. Foundational math skills are important, and having a solid understanding of how those math skills work is even more important. Thank you for watching this School Home Connection video. I hope you're able to walk away with some knowledge, strategies, and a goal to support your child as they develop math skills. If you found this video helpful, it would help me out a lot to leave a like below. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of the School Home Connection videos that come out every single week. And if you have an idea about a future video or a question about this video, leave it in the comments. I'm going to read and reply to them all. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a great day. Keep learning, keep growing. Bye.